Good afternoon, all. The seventh meeting of the Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure is now reconvened, and the committee welcomes all present as well as a viewing and listening public. Please be reminded that the meeting is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView, and Radio 105.5 FM. I am the chairman of this committee. My name is Sophia Choate, and I will invite members of the committee, beginning from the vice chair on my right, to introduce all members of the committee to introduce themselves to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Vice Chair David Lee, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. Christian Birchwood, member.
Good afternoon, all. Foster Cummings, member.
Thank you, members. The purpose of this meeting is to commence the committee's first public hearing pursuant to its inquiry into the effects of quarrying and mining activities on land use, construction and infrastructure development, transport and public works in Trinidad and Tobago. Today we have with us officials and representatives of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, and the National Quarries Company Limited. For the benefit of the public, the objectives of this inquiry are as follows. 1, to examine the impact of quarrying and mining activities on land use and physical development in Trinidad and Tobago. 2, to assess the effects of quarrying and mining activities on construction activity and infrastructure development. 3, to evaluate the extent to which quarrying and mining activities affect the transportation system, road networks, and access routes with particular regard to safety, maintenance, and capacity. 4, to consider the implications of quarrying and mining activities for public works, nearby communities, and sustainable land use planning. 5, to identify measures to strengthen planning oversight and interagency coordination in order to address the effects of quarrying and mining activities on land use, construction, infrastructure, transport, and public works. Now, before I invite the entities represented here to introduce themselves and make their opening remarks, I want to indicate that this committee is supported by the excellent work of a secretariat headed by Mr. Johnson Greenidge, who sits to my left, who is the clerk of this committee, and Ms. Shirlana Ramdeen, who sits to his left. And there are other members of the supporting staff in the room, so they too participate in the process in which you are engaged. I will now ask for introductions, first of all, and then I will ask for opening remarks from the PS, just to give you a heads up. The PS of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, the Chief Technical Officer of the Ministry of Works, and from the Deputy Chairman of National Quarries. So can we start with the introductions? Perhaps we can start going from left to right. Mr. Ganga, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson, members of the committee. My name is Sheldon Ganga. I am the CEO of National Quarries. I've been appointed in March of this year, so I'm relatively new to the position, but I'm sure that I can be able to contribute to today's proceedings. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the team. My name is Barry Regis. I'm the Deputy Chairman of National Quarries, and I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the committee. I am Monty Bihari, Director of Minerals, Ministry of Energy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members of this committee. My name is Karinsa Tulsi. I'm Permanent Secretary acting at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for Ministry of Works and Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Rupert Ramharak. I'm a Senior Project Manager at the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure and the Schedule Officer for National Quarries.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Anton Balfour, Deputy Program Director at Ministry of Works and Transport, PURE.
Afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Baldoo-Doegra. I am Chief Construction Engineer with the Highways Division of the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Reza Ramata, Senior Geologist at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members. My name is Adana Burris-Telfer. I'm a Senior State Counsel acting at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good afternoon, Chair and Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Majid Imran Juman. I am Director at the National Quarries Company Limited.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members. My name is Renelle Bernard Brown, Shoreline Management Specialist of the Coastal Protection Unit, Ministry of Works and Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Mr. Shazal Yassin, Project Loss Prevention and Control Coordinator at the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure.
Okay, I hope I've seen and heard everyone in the room. If so, I will now invite brief opening remarks from the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the Joint Select Committee, good afternoon. On behalf of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, I thank the committee for inviting the ministry to appear before you as part of this important inquiry into the effects of quarrying and mining activities on land use, construction, and infrastructure development, transport, and public works in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm accompanied today by officers of the ministry's Minerals Division and the Legal Services Unit, who possess collective responsibility for the administration and regulation of the mining sector. Together, we welcome the opportunity to assist the committee in its deliberations. Madam Chair, the ministry recognizes that this inquiry addresses matters of considerable national importance. The mineral sector provides the raw materials necessary for housing, roads, bridges, ports, industrial facilities, and virtually every aspect of the country's physical development. At present, there are 50 active mining operations across Trinidad and Tobago, producing a range of construction minerals that support both public and private sector development. Equally, the ministry recognizes that these activities must be conducted responsibly and within a strong regulatory framework to safeguard the environment, neighboring communities' infrastructure, and a long-term sustainable use of the nation's land resources. The ministry exercises its statutory responsibilities under the Minerals Act, Chapter 6103, and the Minerals General Regulations 2015. However, effective regulation of the sector is inherently collaborative and requires close coordination with several agencies, including the Environmental Management Authority, the Town and Country Planning Division, the Water Resources Agency, the Commissioner of State Lands, the Forestry Division, the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, among others. While the committee's inquiry rightly considers the impacts associated with quarrying and mining, it is equally important to recognize that the ministry has undertaken significant initiatives to strengthen governance of the sector. The ministry remains committed to achieving an appropriate balance between facilitating the supply of essential construction materials for national development and ensuring that mining activities are undertaken in a manner that protects the environment, promotes public safety, respects the rights of landowners and communities, and secures appropriate returns to the state from its mineral resources. In closing, Madam Chair, the Ministry appreciates this opportunity to contribute to this inquiry this afternoon, and we look forward to engaging constructively with the committee and responding to members' questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite brief opening remarks from the Chief Technical Officer of the Ministry of Works.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members, distinguished colleagues, and members of the viewing and listening public. On behalf of the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, I thank this committee for the opportunity to contribute to this important national inquiry. The subject before us extends well beyond quarrying and mining. It concerns the sustainable management of one of our nation's most strategic natural resources and its direct influence on national development, economic growth, and public safety. From the ministry's perspective, aggregate is the foundation upon which much of Trinidad and Tobago's infrastructure is built. It is critical to the construction and maintenance of our roads, bridges, drainage networks, coastal protection works, retaining structures, and the erection of buildings. Without a reliable supply of quality aggregate, the delivery of quality public infrastructure cannot be maintained. The quarry and mining industry, if not effectively planned and regulated, imposes significant costs on the ministry and the nation at large. Overloaded trucks accelerate deterioration of our roads and bridges. Poorly maintained quarry operations contribute to sedimentation, flooding, slope instability, environmental degradation, while illegal quarrying undermines sustainable land use, weakens public confidence, and creates unfair competition, and mined areas in unsightly areas remain relatively unrehabilitated. These impacts increase maintenance costs, reduce infrastructure service life, and ultimately affects every citizen. The challenge before us is how can we manage quarrying and mining along with its many impacts responsibly. We must adopt a balanced approach that integrates sound land use planning, effective regulations, environmental rehabilitation, quality assurance, and enforce axle load limits, coordinate in forecasting of aggregate demand, recycling of construction materials, and a stronger interagency collaboration. Such an approach will allow us to secure a sustainable supply of construction materials while safeguarding our infrastructure, protecting our environment, and preserving these finite resources for future generations. Today, the Ministry looks forward to sharing our perspectives, practical observations, and recommendations from our experience in planning, designing, constructing, and maintaining our nation's infrastructure. We remain committed to working collaboratively with this committee and all stakeholders to develop practical solutions that strengthen regulatory oversight, improve sustainability, and support the continued development of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the Deputy Chair of National Quarries to make some brief opening remarks. And because we are anxious to get into the meat of the matter, if you don't mind, I will stress the word brief so that we can get into the discussions at hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members of this committee, members of this gathering, and to the listening public. I must say thank you for inviting us to participate in this very important discussion, Madam Chair. First, let me say, unfortunately, our chairman, Ashmit Ghani, he couldn't be here with us today, so we have a very small team with us. Additionally, there was some important works up at the quarry today, what we call blasting. So some of the members who would have been here are not here today, but I am confident in our new CEO that he is equal to the task and he will be able, together with this small team, provide what is required. And briefly, we know that this board has the legal and fiduciary obligation to provide national quarries with good governance. The board in itself has been newly instituted, that is in December last year. So we are new as well, and we are gathering a lot of information still, discovering new things, but we as well are equal to the task, and I must say just briefly, we are seeing good things happening already at quarries, and I'm excited to be part of this discussion, and I am sure that my CEO, he is equal to the task as well, and our participation will be contribute a good contribution to this discussion.
Certainly, we appreciate your attendance, Mr. Regis, and everybody from National Quarries. Now, I know the representatives of the Ministry of Works have been here before, so they know the protocols. But basically, what's going to happen now is that members will be invited to pose questions to different entities, and you are required to the best of your ability to answer them. If for any reason you don't have the information at hand and you can provide it at a later date, please say so. We look forward to receiving information even after the live hearing finishes. And this is just the first hearing of this inquiry, so don't think that you have to say everything that you need to say today and then feel lost at the end of it if you forgot something, all right? Okay, so members, I invite you.
Madam Chair, with your permission.
Sure.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for being here, and I appreciate, I know many of us may have other plans this evening, but it's important for us to have this important discussion. It came up out of a previous inquiry we would have had where issues of mining and mining operations were raised, licensing regime and so on. So very anxious to get to some of you, we may not get to all of you today. But just for the PS, Ministry of Energy, as you gave your opening remarks, one of the things struck me, what is your overall view of the status of the mining and quarrying industry as we have it now?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. From the perspective of the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy and also in my current capacity as the Chair of the Minerals Advisory Committee, I recognize that there's a lot of work that has to be done with regard to the sector, and the Ministry and the Minerals Advisory Committee has recognized that, and we've undertaken several pieces of work with regard to updating legislation, looking at policy reform that is needed within the sector, and various other elements of the sector that require updating and optimizing of the whole governance framework. And so from my perspective, that is something that we are very focused on, and we have set specific timelines for the work that has to be undertaken, and we are working within those timelines currently.
It'd be good for us to get an idea as to what some of those things that you are proposing.
Sure.
Because from the time when I looked at I just went through briefly some of the reports, one of the things that is painfully obvious is that that the industry, and again going back to Mr. Cooper's opening remarks, to mine responsibly, it needs to be properly regulated.
Yes.
And there's an obvious gap in terms of where we are from a licensing perspective and in terms of the regulatory framework. I mean, even if we were to talk about an interagency approach, it seems as if for a very long time, this industry has remained largely, I don't want to say free for all, but I recently read in the paper some time ago where the police would have closed down some illegal sites So, you know, in terms of how many we have operating, I think there's about 50 sites operating and about 3 processing licenses. And so it means that there's a big gap between those that are legal and those that are operating without any sort of legal or regulatory framework.
Yeah, sure. And if I may just add, Member, in terms of some of the work that we're doing on, so we've recognized that just reviewing the Minerals Act in isolation is not the optimal approach in terms of being comprehensive. And so currently, as we speak, the Minerals Advisory Committee is looking at the Minerals Act, the Minerals Regulation. We're looking at the White Paper on National Minerals Policy from 2015, proposed mining zones. We are looking at the proposal for enhanced enforcement arrangements. That is what would have been the previous Minerals Ranger Squad initiative. We are looking at improvements. As you mentioned, there are significant challenges with the licensing framework. And those include mainly issues with title verification and the application process. So we are looking holistically at that as well and developing recommendations for improvement of that framework. We are looking at mechanisms to improve royalty verification and collection, including integrating technologies such as use of drones into the regulatory framework to enhance the ability of the ministry to verify the amount of royalty that is due to the state. And of course, other operational and administrative reforms that have arisen from lessons learned and from the experience of the technocrats at the Ministry of Energy and within the various agencies in the Minerals Advisory Committee as well, so that we enhance the overall outlook of our regulatory framework.
Okay, P.S., could I just say that I don't think you really answered the question posed by the member, because what the member is trying to direct you to is specifics by using an example of saying, look, the police, the commissioner of police, as a matter of fact, was reported in the newspaper as having had to go to shut down, I don't know if it's quarrying sites or whatever it was. I think the minister is trying to get some specifics from you. And one of the specifics, I think, would be why were these sites not shut down before? How long had they existed and how long had they been operating illegally? If we could have some information with respect to things like that, then I think this committee would be better informed.
So I'll answer generally, and then I will ask the Director of Minerals if he wants to add anything specific.
Sure.
And beyond that, if there's any information that we would be required to share in writing beyond today's hearing as well, we would be most willing to do so. I think with regard to enforcement, it is a shared responsibility. Of course, the Ministry of Energy has responsibility, but we also have to work, as I mentioned before, collaboratively with several other organizations, including the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, in treating with the issue of illegal mining operations. And so that is what I would say on a general sense with regard to enforcement. And as I mentioned, there is work that we need to do in terms of the previous recommendations with the Minerals Ranger Squad and so on. And that is what the committee is doing at this point. And coming out of that, we would be making recommendations to the Honorable Minister of Energy based on what the committee has found that is required to enhance the enforcement going forward.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm trying to help us get to the point. Is it that you all have had difficulties with enforcement because you are required to make requests of the TTPS? What becomes of those requests, for example?
And so I would hand over to the Director of Minerals with regard to specific operational issues.
Sure, I think that would help us. Yeah? Yes.
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you, PS. Yes, with respect to enforcement against illegal activity, under the Minerals Act, the Director does not have the power to arrest anyone. The power to arrest, the power to investigate, stop, search, seize equipment, all resides with the police. So when we receive complaints, and we have a system whereby we have forms that any member of the public can fill out and submit to us, we would then submit those forms, together with any supporting documents people may submit, to the multi-agency task force. And that's a task force that was established by the Commissioner of Police. And that task force includes TTPS officers, as well as members of various agencies, including the Ministry of Energy, the EMA, Town and Country, Water Resources, Commission of State Lands, Conservator of Forests, Director of Surveys, OSHA, and several Electrical Inspectorate, Customs and Excise, and several other agencies. And that task force does not only quarrying, but other types of enforcement against other activities, including trafficking, such things as counterfeiting, cigarettes, all sorts of different things. So depending on the nature of the complaint, the task force will call upon the various agencies as they see fit. With respect to the investigation of these complaints, it's really a police action, and the entire investigation is led by the police. They would conduct the investigations, they will collect the intelligence, they will monitor, and once they have built a case, or they have sufficient evidence to take the next steps, they will enforce at that point in time. But we do not direct the police how they should do it or where they should go. We simply work with the complaints that comes to us. So complaints comes to us through members of the public. Complaints come to us from one quarry operator against others. The complaints also go directly to the police. So there are several complaints that we don't see, that anyone can make a complaint at any police station or directly to the multi-agency task force, and they would investigate it. The time frame for investigations, again, resides with what they have to deal with. So each case is separate. Each case would have its own complexities. In some cases, there are very complex issues to deal with. And in fact, what they usually find when they go out is, if there is illegal quarrying, it's not simply illegal quarrying. There are associated illegal activities. In some cases, they may find narcotics. In some cases, they may find firearms, illegal firearms, other things that they will have to deal with. So it's really a police action that has to take its course. And that's really what takes time sometimes. They have to build sufficient evidence to approach the DPP before they can take certain action. So there's no quick answer to say that if a complaint is made today, it will be investigated in 2 days' time, and action will be taken in 5 days' time. It's a case-by-case basis, depending on the nature of the activity and what they find out there.
Well, I suppose that is true for any criminal investigation, but in the written material you sent, for example, I see that in 2021 there were 0 criminal charges, even though from the very material that we have before us, it's quite clear that much of what was going on was illegal quarrying at the sites that you've identified. But the Vice Chair has a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. But I'll start off with my first question based on what the PS was in responding to Member Surat Singh. You mentioned PS, or you made a statement of royalty verification. I want to get into that royalty aspect of the quarrying, meaning that, could you tell us how the royalty payments work? Because it is part of the revenue, one of the revenue-generating measures for the government, and it has been a concern for me when I was in opposition, and now I'm in government, that the government has not been collecting their fair share or the true amount that royalties should be paid from these quarry operators. So could you enlighten me and the public how this royalty system works and what has been happening with the collection, the true collection of these royalty payments? And that's my first question. I have a second follow-up question.
Thank you for the question. Again, I will say that the royalty is based on production, and so what the ministry would have relied on heavily in the past and up to current time would be the production reporting that comes from the submissions by the operators. we are now looking at improving and modernizing that process because of the challenges that you have outlined in terms of ensuring that the royalty that is recovered by the state is what is supposed to be recovered. We are looking at, in addition to the production reporting that we receive, modernizing the process of royalty determination through aerial drone surveys and ground verification exercises by the officers of the Minerals Division. Also improving title verification so that we could accurately determine the production volumes as well as the ownership of the minerals. And so we believe that these initiatives will significantly strengthen royalty assessment and collection in terms of some of the challenges in the past and the actual mechanism used by the ministry. I would ask the Director of Minerals to elaborate further.
So, yes, before the Director elaborates, and I have a question for the Director. Is it fair to say, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is it fair to say that whatever government is in place, the government of the day or the past, the government and the people of Trinidad have not been getting their true royalty payments based on what you just described?
I would agree that there are several challenges with the process and the payment of royalties that needs to be addressed. And so the ministry, and I can speak on behalf of the ministry, we are working actively to address some of those concerns and to close some of the gaps that currently exist.
But is there any estimation as to how much royalties Trinidad and Tobago would have foregone less in the last 20 years?
That specific, I would ask the Director to answer.
Okay, but before the Director answers, I just want to make sure that the Vice Chair is finished because I think... Okay, I think you had a question for the Director as well. Yes, you want to go ahead?
You want me to ask it one time?
Sure.
Director, before you answer the aspect of royalties, in your opening remarks reached just now, this might sound a sort of weird question, but given what has been happening in the quarrying business in Trinidad and what you had recently just described with the police and so forth, what constitutes an illegal quarry operator or quarry? What constitutes an illegal quarry? I'm a bit confused based on what I've read in the documentation that you all would have submitted, based on what you would have said, and based on what I know has been going on in the quarry business in Trinidad. What really constitutes an illegal quarry?
Okay, through you, Chair. The first question with respect to the royalties. The verification of royalties to determine whether the state is getting its fair share is not something new. In fact, I would have been before one of these committees many years ago when that question was raised. And since then, we have taken steps to introduce aerial surveys. So we recently completed an exercise. We are processing the data now, which will assist us to physically check production from each quarry. In the past, the royalty system was an honor system, whereby the operators simply submitted returns to us saying that they produce X quantity per quarter or per year. And there was no verification, independent verification in that sense. With the surveying method, which is the aerial surveys, we will be able to physically check how much was actually extracted. And using our geologists and our geomatics engineers, they would be able to compute within reason a fairly accurate figure. That can then be compared with the figures being reported, and we will know whether the production is in line with what the operators are reporting. The rate of royalty, which is in the minerals regulations, specifies the rate to be applied for the mineral type per cubic meter or per ton, depending on the type of mineral. So there is a way for us to check that. Additionally, for the quarries that use explosives, we can calculate using the explosives, using the blast designs, and using the quantities of explosives used and how their blasts are configured, the yields from those quarries. So we have a third way to calculate how much production actually takes place at those particular quarries that use explosives. So there are ways for us to narrow down a production figure that is more in line with the actual production. The production multiplied by the rate of royalty for the specific mineral will give us the mineral type. So we are tying in that aspect of verification of what is actually produced. The second side of it is the collection of the royalties. Once those figures come in and we audit the figures and we have sent a letter, which is basically a statement to each operator indicating this is what your production was, this is what your royalties are, they then have to pay to the state. And in some cases, if they are unable to pay all, the mineral regulation provides that they may approach the minister in writing and request essentially a payment plan so they can pay it off over a period of time. So we are in process of dealing with that. So with respect to the question, is the state getting its fair share? We are addressing that. It takes some time because there's a lot of resources required and a lot of coordination necessary. So once the documents coming to us, we do our independent verification. We may also send our people on the ground, geomatics persons, in addition to the aerial surveys data, to check and verify that persons are not encroaching over their boundaries onto neighboring state or private lands, etc. So we are taking steps to correct that aspect of it and hope to collect all the outstanding royalties. Now, if persons are refusing to pay royalties, we are now where we have to explore another option, which may be similar to what some of the state agencies do, for instance, WASA and some of these state agencies, in that we may consider referring it to an external agency for collection. But that is something that we are just discussing in-house. With respect to the second question, what constitutes an illegal quarry? It may be easier to answer the question, what constitutes a legal quarry? And what is not legal would be illegal. So a legal quarry is any quarry that has a license.
Okay, so then I want to just follow up based on what you just said about royalty and verification. Who do you verify? I just want to follow up based on your definition of how the process of the verification exercise for collection of royalty. It's based on operators sending in, firstly, an honor system and production reports. Who do you then verify? Do you only verify what you consider legal quarrying, which might not be the entire pool?
Right, so production with the intention of computing a royalty applies to legal quarries. If someone is out there, they do not have a license, they have invaded the state lands, the forest reserves, and they have extracted material, they would not pay a royalty. They are essentially stealing from the state, so that would be a larceny offense. That is a separate issue, it's not a royalty issue.
So how many legal quarries that you have in operation on paper at the Ministry of Ministry of Energy?
At this point in time, there are 31 quarries that are operating, that have licenses, or whose licenses expired and they were issued holdover letters. These are the active. Additionally, there are those whose licenses expired and they are not doing anything at this point in time. But we have engaged them. In fact, just last week, Thursday, Friday, and this past Monday, we would have invited all persons on our records who had a license that expired, as well as those who need to get their renewal, and those whose licenses expired and are not doing anything, as well as those who have submitted applications in the past that expired and they are not doing anything. And we invited everyone in. We got 66 persons attending the sessions. And these are persons who have indicated their interest in obtaining licenses to go forward. So we are taking steps to ensure that everyone who is operating has a license, and everyone who wishes to operate in the future can get a license.
Well, with all due respect,
Convoluted.
Mr. Director, that actually is quite a scary place for us to be, because it would mean that you have few licensed quarries in operation, which means the state is earning very little in terms of royalties. You know, if you take into account all of the quarrying being done in Trinidad and Tobago, which essentially is unaccounted for in any way, because royalties are not being paid on illegal operations, and furthermore, from what we can see from the table, very little is done in terms of police action to stop it. So it's not a criticism of you, because enforcement is not what you do, but I have to say that it's my observation that that is a very scary thing for us to hear as a committee. But Member Cummings has a question. Afterwards? Sure.
Thank you, Chair. This question could go to either the PS or the Director. Going back to the discussion concerning the licenses. What other than tenure would you say stands in the way of more operators being licensed in a timely manner? And I have a follow-up to that question.
So I think in terms of the length of time it takes to issue a license, the major issue is really the issue of land ownership verification, so that the title searches required to be conducted to verify ownership of the minerals rights is something that is necessary based on the law for us to have in place before we can issue a license. So that would be the major challenge. And then several other agencies' approvals as well. So the Town and Country Planning approval, the EMA approvals from the Commissioner of State Lands were applicable, as well as some of the other approvals within the licensing application process that we've seen challenges with applicants being able to meet. And having recognized some of the challenges, I think, that have existed for quite some time, and recognizing the need to have persons obtain their license and be operating legally and paying the royalties that are due to the state. That is what we are currently looking at in terms of the review of the legislation, the act and the regulations, to see how we can streamline to help the application process and to enable the ministry to be able to issue licenses in a quicker space of time, and enable the applicants to be able to meet the requirements as well.
Thank you.
This is a follow-up.
You have a follow-up?
Yes, please.
Sure.
In terms of the processing license, could you tell us a bit about that, and how is it that there's such a small number of persons or operators with processing licenses as opposed to quarry licenses?
Yes, through you, Chair. The processing license is the application process, and the license itself, the requirements for the license are quite similar to the requirements for a mining license. There may be one or two documents, technical documents, that are different, but there is nothing that prevents anyone from submitting an application and submitting all the required documents. The challenge that we have had, from my observations over the years, has been the non-submission of documents. So I've seen persons submit an application form and a copy of the receipt for payment, and that's it. There are no deeds, survey plans, technical documents, company documents, title documents, nothing. Those are real examples. So the challenge really is having the persons who are interested in a license complete their application. That's from the side of the applicants. On the side of the state, our challenge has always been the verification of the ownership. And it's very important because Section 5 of the Act and Section 18 of the Act makes it very clear that public mining rights are exercisable by the state. Private mining rights are exercisable by the owners of the private minerals, subject to the Minerals Act. So they must have a license. Section 18 of the Act makes it very clear that if the applicant for a license, mining or processing, is not the owner of the land, which would be both the surface estate or mineral estate, either or both, the applicant must obtain permission from the owner. So the owner must essentially issue a lease to the applicant indicating that the owner has consented to the use of the land for a period of time for that particular purpose. We find that many persons who apply are not the owners, and they do not have that permission. These are some of the things that prevents license applications from going forward. So it's a time factor of license applications not being completed in a timely manner or not being completed at all, as well as having the verification of the mineral ownership and surface ownership. So those are some of the things that we've had with respect to the applications that come in that have title documents. We have just started advising. It's something that we have considered as part of one of the recommendations for the amendment to the minerals regs that will tie in to the application process. But we have started advising persons that if they wish at their own expense, they may submit a private title search from a private attorney, which we will consider and then submit on to what was the chief state, but the Department of Civil Law now for verification. So that speeds up the process. So we are trying on our end to speed the process up. But the biggest challenge has to do with applicants themselves not submitting all the documents. So if an application comes in and it's incomplete, there's only one real recommendation that can be made. And that's why there's a 90-day time limit that a lot of people complain about, but it's there for a purpose, to assist them and give them some extra time to complete the application.
Well, to me, if you don't do it in time, then you're timed out, and it means that whatever you do thereafter will be considered illegal. It's as straightforward as that, or maybe I am seeing it differently. But we have
Chair,
a
could I just
question.
clarify your previous question that you asked with respect to the number of quarries operating and the quantity, etc. There's no direct relationship. There's not a one-to-one relationship between the number of quarries and the production from quarries. Each quarry would be of a different size. For instance, National Quarries, 800 and something hectares, roughly 2,000 acres. Some other quarries may be 100 and something acres. Others are 5 acres or 20 acres. So there's no direct relationship between the number of quarries and the production that comes out. So there may be 10 quarries operating, but the 10 largest quarries, and they may produce 80% of all the materials needed. So there's no relationship there, let's say.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Understood. Member Alexander?
Thank you, Chair. But before I ask my question, I can't remember if I didn't hear if you gave an answer to Member Swarat Singh's question about the volume of royalties that we may have missed out on in the last 20 years. Did anybody answer that?
I don't believe that we answered that question, but what I can tell you from the audits that we have been doing, the audits started in October 2006 and they were retroactive from January 1, 2005. We have that data. And again, some of the challenges with completing some of the audits for persons who are operating, who had licenses, is that they don't submit their returns, annual returns and quarterly returns. And we are working with them as part of their license renewal process to get those. So all production from January 1, 2005 to the present time, almost 20, 21 years, we would be able to account for that. Prior to that, it would have been...
But when? With the Honorable Director.
Just an idea.
Okay, we can provide you, Chair, we could provide you with those figures in writing. So it's not something I want to call off the top of my head.
Because the thing is, we want to get an idea. You're talking about a fairly lengthy period, 2 decades, right? I think what Member Swarat Singh was trying to hone in on is, well, what have we lost, or what are we likely to be continue to lose if we don't have a proper system to make sure that people pay royalties when they are required to do so at the end of the day?
Chair, it's not an easy question to answer, and I can explain. Right now, we have several matters before the Department of Civil Law where we have asked for assistance to determine the ownership of the mineral rights. Persons pay royalties where the state owns the mineral rights. So there are persons in this country who own the mineral rights themselves, or they may be operating on land that someone else owns, who owns the mineral rights, a third party. They don't pay royalties to the state, so that is not a royalty due to the state. So before we could give you the answer to that, we have to be very clear that those persons who have operated, we have the production
What did you
figures.
just say, though? The people operating private quarries don't pay royalties?
No. Land, there's the surface estate and the mineral estate for land. The owner of the mineral estate, and I went back to Section 5 and Section 18 of the Act earlier. If
the
land,
Act, the Mineral Act?
The Minerals Act, yes.
Of 2000?
Minerals Act of 2000.
That is the applicable act right now?
Chapter 6103, yes. If someone owns the mineral estate, they may own the mineral estate and the surface estate, if it's a fee simple estate. And so in many cases, someone may own the minerals, but not the surface. In a lot of cases, someone owns the surface privately, but the state owns the minerals. The state only gets a royalty where the state owns the mineral rights. So if the mineral rights are owned or the mineral estate is owned privately, the state does not get a royalty. That has been the challenge with me answering that question for you, how much is actually owed. Because we have quite a number of searches still at the Department of Civil Law, some of them for 4 years or so, to determine who is the actual owner of the mineral rights. So
yes, I understand. And in fact, if you look at some of the older deeds or memoranda of transfer, you will see that these rights are reserved to the private owners. So I appreciate
just to give you an
what
example,
you're saying.
we had a figure of roughly $17 million for a private entity in the past. And when the searches were done, it came back that the entity owned the mineral rights. So initially, it would have been reported that they owe $17 million to the state, but after the searches were completed, it shows that they own the mineral rights, so they did not owe the state anything. So to give you an exact figure, we would have to indicate to you clearly which ones we have confirmation of state mineral rights and which ones are currently still being searched. We can provide that in writing.
In the Act, 45(1) of the Act is clear on the offense of mining without a license, under any circumstance. Once you do have a license, it's a criminal act, $500,000 imprisonment for 5 years. If you're mining and if you're buying. If you buy minerals from somebody who's not authorized to quarry, similar. Are these enforced? Have they ever been enforced?
Member Alexander, perhaps you didn't catch my eye before you posed your question, and that's why I didn't get the full question.
Well, I didn't ask my question before. I was following up Member Swartzing's question. But my question is 45 of the Act that explains the offense. And it says a person who mines basically without a license commits an offense, and if guilty, $500,000 and 5 years in jail. And if somebody purchases minerals from an unlicensed person, a similar, and I just wanted to know if that has ever been enforced, if anybody's ever been prosecuted, charged.
Yes, well, because we have 3 entities here, and because I think it's quite clear now that one of the entities we will have to invite to these discussions will be the TTPS. I think perhaps maybe we should save our question.
Section 30 of the same Act puts the responsibility on the director.
Yes. So, Director, can you answer?
Yes, Chair, I can answer those questions. Section 30 of the Act refers to investigations, but
enforcement.
The title is enforcement. It refers to investigations. But if you read this section carefully, it refers to investigations to find minerals. So the director wears different hats under this Act, one of which is to develop and manage the mineral resources of the country, in particular the state resources. The second is to regulate the industry under sections 9, 10, and 11, as well as 35.
But
I'm very familiar with the Act.
Have you ever enforced?
With respect to section 45 and what you referred to, the key word you missed on that there is knowingly purchase, and I've been advised by the police.
Okay, but forget the buyer.
That's a whole
the
other
miner.
issue. Yes.
Somebody's mining illegally without a license.
Yes.
A quarry is not an easy thing to hide. So if a quarry is active, you would know somebody is committing that illegal act. Has this law ever been applied?
The answer, Chair, yes. The law has been applied, and I go back to the observation you made during 2020 or 2021 based on the data that no charges were laid. Once the information is brought to the attention of the police, they will investigate, and once they find they have sufficient evidence, they will lay charges and charge persons. Charges have been laid under this Act, and more so, charges have been laid under the State Lands Act. And I believe when it comes to prosecuting and dealing with DPP's office and whatnot, the police, I'm advised, have always been advised that it was easier at that point in time to take action under the State Lands Act for many of the things. So persons have been charged, persons have been convicted in some cases.
But not under this Act.
persons have been charged under the Act.
But nobody's been convicted under this
I
act.
think there are lots of matters that are still before the court. And again,
Okay,
those are
so,
outside
so
of my remit.
let's not get bogged down in this, and I don't want us to only have questions for the Ministry of Energy. I must say that you all have done your best to try to assist us, and I'm sure that we have tons of other questions for you. You may have to come back, or we may have to write to you to answer further questions along these lines. But before we move on, Member Swarat Singh has one last question, which I will permit to the Ministry of Energy, and then we need to move on to the other stakeholders.
More of a comment,
Sure.
correlate to what you're saying. Just as far as I'm concerned, I appreciate your efforts, but the response lacks specificity. And so I would, when we invite you back, I'd really ask you to focus on some specific responses. I'm happy to know what you're trying to do, but what I haven't gotten at all is what is the current state? Where are we? You know, and so if when you come back, if you can bring some more specifics in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Possibly, yes. Thank you, Member. Okay, so now I'm going to invite questions to the National Quarries Company Limited. I know that we have, a sort of strict time frame. We don't want to keep you all here too late. You've been very good because this is the second time you're attending in answer to our invitation. But we can't use all our time on the Ministry of Energy as much as we would like to be able to do so. So members, do you have any questions? Member Cummings?
Chair, to either the Deputy Chair or the CEO, would you share with us what is the real function of the national quarries in this industry?
Okay, through you, Chair. National Quarries is responsible to provide the country with quality aggregate at an affordable price. This entails the quarrying, processing, and supply of aggregate, blasting operations, environmental management and regulatory compliance in quarry operations, commercial supply of aggregate to public and private sector entities, technical quality assurance of aggregate products, participation in national infrastructure development. As the main supplier for state enterprises and companies, National Quarries ensure competitive pricing and market regulations. Basically, that is.
Thank you, Mr. Regis. So in other words, National Quarries is a state enterprise responsible for all that you've said, and therefore is a player in the market in competition with private sector?
I would say yes, sir.
Yes, Member Swarat Singh?
Thank you very much. And again, this is generally to everyone. I understand, I've been out to the island for a while, so I understand the state of the industry is not related to anybody who is currently here. It's been going on for a very long time. And you have intimated that you are happy to be in quarries now, and you're getting it back on stream or something to that effect and so on. What does that mean? So have you in fact, let me ask you this. Do you have a license?
Through Chair, I would want to refer that question to the CEO.
Sure. We are not in possession of a license at this point in time, but we do have
So you're acting
holdover. No, we're not illegal. We do have a holdover letter issued from the Ministry of Energy. Yeah. We have made applications in the past, and those applications were not successful, again, because some of the documents were not available to support our application. So in that time period,
when do you expect to get a license?
Well, we have a year in which to get it. So,
okay. So you are waiting on that letter for the time being?
The holdover letter, yes.
Could I just ask, sorry to interject, how long have you been without a license?
The last license that was issued was, I think, 2017?
No,
2017.
So you've been operating on the basis of a letter
Of a
since
hold.
2017?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, sure, Vice Chair.
Thank you, CEO. Based on what the Director of Minerals is talking about, who has rights to minerals and who pays royalties based on who owns the mineral rights, does the National Quarry Limited pay royalties?
We have an outstanding balance from a legacy amount from way back.
So, no, the question
but
is,
current, yes.
No. Are you entitled to pay royalties?
Yes, we do.
But you mine or process on state lands, correct?
That is correct.
So what would prevent you from paying royalties? What would result in a backlog? I mean, I'm just asking somebody unfamiliar with these things.
Sure. And again, it predates my existence, but in the past, probably financial constraints would have prevented payment of.
No, Chair, you're confusing me. I just want to stay. So National Quarries Limited, and I'm just looking for some guidance. So bear with me, both the Director of Minerals. So National Quarries Limited is a state enterprise mining on state lands. They pay royalties to the state. So help me, Director of Minerals, when you give the scenario about who is entitled to pay royalties based on who owns the mineral rights, I just pre-seeing here. I'm a bit confused that National Quarries, which is mining on state lands, whose state would own the mineral rights, if I'm correct, pays royalties to the state. So I'm a bit confused. Can you help me clarify my misunderstanding of what you had said about who pays royalties based on who owns the mineral rights and etc.?
Through you, Chair, yes. National Quarries is a state entity. The shares are owned 100% by Corporation Sole, Minister of Finance. But it is registered under the Companies Act, and it's treated as an entity. I think Corporation Sole is similar to any of the entities that operate in the petroleum sector, Heritage and its predecessor, Petroleum, Petrotrin, so they would pay royalties to the state. That's the relationship. So it's an entity registered under the Companies Act. It pays royalties to the state. The state, they are operating on state lands. The state owns the mineral rights. They pay the royalties to the state. With respect to why they're not paying the royalties, that's a question.
I'm not getting into that.
Let me clarify that they have been paying royalties.
No. You gave an example of a $17 million.
Yes.
That by a quarry operator or processor that had to pay royalties, and when you dig into it, was the mineral rights were owned by the private owner or something like that, and they did not really have to pay the $17 million. Isn't that what you said?
Yes, and I use that example because
correct, but I'm trying to understand that example and why they did not pay the royalties or don't have to pay the royalties. I'm just confused by that.
Yes, so National Quarries is a company. It does not own the state lands. The state lands are owned by the state, exercisable by the president. And the Commissioner of State Lands is the landlord who collects rents and royalties.
I still don't understand the $17 million. Yes. Why that individual did not have to pay the $17 million?
Because the mineral right.
Okay, so could we have not everybody talking at the same time? Because otherwise, the people listening and viewing wouldn't be able to get a clear idea of what we're saying, and the recording, the Hansard recorders will not be able to get a clear idea of what to take down. So I get what you're asking, Vice Chair, but I suspect that it is something that we should, having regard to the time, that we can ask. Just yes, we'll come. Understood. I will have to ask you, sir, to give us more specifics about the facts of that case dealing with the $17 million which the state thought was owed to it, but which you are saying turned out not to be owing. If you could give us some particulars of that, that would be useful to us. All right? Now, I don't want us jumping back too much to the Ministry of Energy. I'm trying to make sure that everybody in the room is able to have some input today. Member Alexander, after Member Cummings, you go next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm back to National Quarries. You said that the last time you had a license was in 2017, but National Quarries operates on state land only. And the ministry indicated one of the main handicaps to issuing licenses was land tenure issues. What would account for the National Quarries that operates on state lands not being able to access a license for such a long period of time?
Madam Chair, through you, I just want to make a correction to what I stated before. The last mining license was acquired in 2006. So from that period of time, we operated on holdover letters all these years.
That makes it even a bit more alarming. So can someone indicate to this committee what would account for that situation? Because based on what the director said, as in terms of the licenses, the major issues fall with the applicants who do not submit all the information. So if I add to my question, Director, is it that you are satisfied that the operation of the licensing arrangement is efficient and that problems really lie with the applicants, as you said earlier? And therefore, if that is the case, what is the handicap to National Quarries being granted a license?
Through you, Chair, yes, I believe the process is not as difficult as people make it out to be, and it is efficient. There are some things that we are streamlining. The challenge, yes, is really first and foremost with the applicants not completing their applications and submitting them in a timely manner. And with respect to specifically to National Quarries, they would have had some issues in the past with respect to their certificate of environmental clearance. I know that was one of the big challenges they had. That matter would have ended up somewhere in the environmental court. But specifics to National Quarries are something that only National Quarries would be able to answer.
Well, I get the impression, with all due respect, that we are talking around an issue here because we are not getting direct answers as to why National Quarries cannot get a license. But before I jump ahead, Member Alexander, I had promised you that I would take you next, and I see that Member Swarat Singh has a question right after. Go ahead.
I don't know if I think I should defer to the member.
Entirely up to you.
I want to be able to get my question after.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleague. So one of the general perception that we had from a previous hearing to now is that this whole industry, it's fraught with all kinds of things. And some of it might stem from the regulatory side. Some of it will stem from the operation side. I mean, if you look at the Ministry of Works submission, talk about the negative impact of this not being regulated properly when it comes to the environmental issues and all kinds of other issues. Even if you say, Director, that the process is fairly straightforward, but they don't have a CEC, it means that probably in your mining committee, you might need to include the EMA or town country, maybe, but in all your answers, what is missing is when will this be done by? When will the regulation, when will we have, if you're saying that some of the audits and so on is going back since 2000 and whenever, that you have another license in 2006, it begs the question, And it is not referring to maybe anybody in this room, but something is wrong. And what we're trying to get to is to the point where what are the specific recommendations, what are the specific issues, and when will these things be addressed by? How much money are we missing? How many illegal operations are there? What is your enforcement like? You know, how are you bringing interagency resources in a committee to deal with application processes and so on? You understand what I'm saying? It's all of these answers you're given talks around the issues, but what I am not getting are what are the specifics, by when, by how much, by who. And that's what I think we are missing in the answers that we've been given so far. Sorry, Chair.
No, I think, member, that you are expressing a point of view that is probably shared by the majority, if not all, of the members of this committee. But let's move on to Member Alexander's question.
Thank you, Chair. And following on everybody's questions, thank you all for uniting us, totally bipartisan now, because it seems that it is in crisis. I worry for the people looking on at this committee, because this is one of the reasons people lose faith in government. Everything seems unnecessarily convoluted for what could be a simple process. And what I think we're looking for from you all is somebody to say, this is a way forward. Does anybody have a clear idea of how we could go forward regulating and monetizing the mineral rights of Trinidad and Tobago? Does anybody from any organization?
Through you, Chair, the Honorable Member Swarat Singh did touch on something pertinent here. For instance, the regulatory framework needs to be more practical, as there are some circular references among agencies when applying for license. For example, the mining/processing license application requires the water abstraction permit and approvals of the mining and processing template for water resources agencies, and the application for the water abstraction permit requires mining processing license. There's a lot of overlap between the agencies. For instance, for tongue and country approval, the copy of the water abstraction permit is required. However, without tongue and country approval, you cannot get a mining processing license, which is required for the abstraction permit. So there are a lot of intertwine between the agencies, a lot of going wrong in circles there, and that needs to be separated, segregated, and regularized. In going forward, I do not have the answers, but we know some of the issues that is affecting the permitting processing.
But Mr. Regis, just could you tell us, perhaps because you've been there longer, could you tell us what's a sticking point? What is preventing national quarries? Well, I wouldn't say preventing, but what are the hurdles to national quarries to getting a license?
Through your chair, I would
Sure.
to see you.
Madam Chair, National Quarries has been around for a long time. And part of the CEC process involves a baseline survey. We would have had no baseline surveys way back. So, you know, this is one of the hurdles that we have to overcome in order to get a CEC. So it will take some level of collaboration with the EMA to come to some grandfathering process whereby we can get a CEC and not just, you know, be waiting on because we can't get, there's something that is impossible. We can't get a baseline survey because we have been operating for so long. So that is one of the issues, yes, and one of the requirements of getting a mining license.
Yes, understood. Sounds like you have to, in some senses, you have to start from scratch, which must be very difficult. Any questions? I'm trying to keep an eye on the time, so I'm going to take a last round of questions for national quarries. Member Birchwood.
Thank you, Chair. A vague question. Has the TTPS provided any reports on the companies that were closed or shut down? Because I believe this information, bringing the TTPS into this information that they could provide, most likely could channel us into getting things right, because we could see where the hurdles are. So how closely do you all actually liaise with the TTPS?
With respect to ongoing, through the Chair, with respect to ongoing matters that are before the courts and the TTPS are pursuing with the DPP, we don't really get that information. So we don't get involved once action is taken by the police, except where they need expert witnesses. So they usually would come and ask for a geologist to identify samples, take samples, and provide that evidence and so on.
So you all wouldn't know, sorry to interject, but so you all will not know why the company is shut down? You just know that it stopped operating?
Again, it's each investigation, each complaint is different. So depending on what the issues are with a particular site that they would have shut down, they may have different things happening. Usually, once the police takes action, they would come to us to request the assistance of expert witnesses, and usually they would ask for information in writing as to whether the person or persons who were held or so on the site are in possession of valid licenses at that point in time. So that's really the extent to which we are involved. But most of that is criminal work, police work for criminal offenses that we don't really get involved in.
Okay, so all you will know is that the company most likely will not have a license. You're only concerned with the license then?
That is correct. The only evidence that we are required to provide to the police, and I assume when they liaise with the DPP, is whether the person or persons held or company has a license, a license at that point in time, and they may wish to request the assistance of expert witnesses such as professional geologists and sometimes geomatics engineers. In some cases, they would approach the director of surveys for licensed land surveyors, and in other cases where persons are held on state lands, they will request the assistance of state lands officers to provide evidence on that part of it. But
yes,
criminal investigation are criminal police.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you, but as I say, we're on a timeline here. And Member Dowlett has a question.
Thank you, through you, Chair. National Quarries spoke about their responsibility to regulate the quality of the aggregate. And they have some kind of quality assurance mandate. So speaking from the perspective of the people who use it, small contractors, you would have protocols in place for buildings, and some of these buildings will be given a lifespan in terms of the quality of the aggregate. Who actually, whether it's National Quarries or the private persons who are quarrying, who actually assures the quality of the sand, the gravel, whatever it is that comes out, and gives that kind of, are there any standards for it? And how do we know, how do those contractors know so that, because different grades of material can be used in different kinds of structures. So my question is, we into all of this, but the material goes somewhere, it's been used. I think we're still in an earthquake zone. We have a neighboring country that had earthquakes recently. And the quality of the aggregate actually is important for the kind of structures to ensure that, they're safe and so on. So I wanted to go to that point now in terms of the quality of the aggregate and the quality assurance, and how does this now come down to, say, for example, myself, if I want to put up a structure, how do I know which quarry, which kind of material meets these standards and things like that?
Sure.
And who does it?
CEO?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. National Quarries, we have our own in-house lab. So we do testing on our materials, and we test according to ASTM standards, which which defines grading. It defines the presence of harmful organic materials. It determines moisture content. It determines particle size. So these are some of the standards in which we use to measure our material buy. When our customers purchase from us, they are assured that these are the standards that we meet, and we sell our materials according to these standards. Individual concrete producers, they also have their own labs, and they also do their own testing to verify, so that when you buy a truckload of concrete, they can give you as well standards based on concrete and standards then. So that's the process.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in your written submissions to us, you indicated, now it could be that it has changed since you sent these in, but you said the company is unable to perform critical quality tests to ensure that finished products meet end user requirements. And you refer to California bearing ratio, LA abrasion, standard Proctor test, etc. Due to the need for upgrades to National Quarries lab facilities. As a result, there may be instances where the end users may receive materials that may not meet specifications. Are you able to clarify this for us?
Sure, Madam Chair. The ASTM standards deal with, we operate two quarries, two types of quarries. One, a limestone quarry, and the other, a sand and gravel quarry. So the ASTM standards more relate to the sand and gravel for use in concrete end products. The standards that you're referring to deals with the limestone part, which deals with roads and on that side of things. We don't have the equipment to test these particular quality standards. However, we do use independent labs to verify the materials, but again, the regularity on which we do the testing sometimes is not as much as we would like, and sometimes there are gaps in terms of the materials that there may be gaps depending on the source rock that we are mining. There may be gaps in terms of the quality of the material.
Okay, so this is, I want to get to the Ministry of Works, but I know the Ministry of Works, the personnel, they are good friends of this committee, so I'm sure that they wouldn't mind coming back at another point if we can't spend too long with them today. So let's go first with Member Swarat Singh and then Member Cummings.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up to Member Dowlad's question, because I'm not sure if he asked a specific question based on quality, not just for national quarries, but across the board. But if you are saying that your quality assurance is just for your products, it begs the question, how is quality assured with all the private? Because I know that's one of the things Ministry of Works alluded to in their submission, in terms of having quality products for all their projects and infrastructure. Who assures quality from the private people?
Who do you want to answer that question?
I don't know.
Open forum.
Well, the CEO is going to take a shot at it.
I'm going to take a shot at it. I think the end user, the end user specifies the material types, engineering-wise, the material standards that's required. So if you are going to a particular
with all due respect, sir, with all due respect, let's say Philip Alexander is building a house, and he's the end user, and he has to verify whatever standards. Even if he says these are the specifications, how does he verify it?
And I need my house to stand up.
He has asked for a certificate from the supplier.
So we have no way of verifying standards then across the board.
Let me
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
is there something you could assist us
Yes.
with respect to this?
Yes, so what's supposed to happen is that the end user is supposed to request a certificate for real. So if he is, let's say, purchasing concrete, he is supposed to request the information from the concrete supplier with respect to the materials, all the additives that will be used in the concrete production. And so that would be his one area for verification, as well as he could take on a private consultant to do his quality checks. At the Ministry of Works, for example, we have standards, specifications, which would guide the type of material that should be used on a particular project or whatever area we intend to work on. So we would have different, based on the type of project it is, we would have different tests being done. And that may be done internally within the ministry's lab, or it could be done by a third party. We would also depend upon the aggregate supplier, for example, to provide some initial documentation with respect to the quality of that material. If we purchase it from a contractor, for example, he is supposed to provide some quality information as well for us.
Well, you know, Mr. Cooper, I just make a quick observation before I take the question from Member Cummings, and I know that Vice Chair has some questions for the Ministry of Works. But if I'm the end user, somebody building a house, how do I know I'm required? What tells me that, what out there in the ether, as it were, tells me that I'm required to ask for a certificate? Is there some law or something, or something on the ministry's website even that says or guides citizens as to what they should do if they are buying material? Is there anything like that before we take the question from Member Cummings?
Ideally, they should, persons in the public should go to professional persons to get advice. So, for example, there's the Board of Engineering, there's APET as well, that they should ideally liaise with and have professionals guide them with respect to whatever
Yes, but you know, that really is a luxury, right? We're talking for let's say somebody a young couple building a house for the first time in Navet, where we saw that pond which was going like this, which means that there was movement on the land. I mean, would they be people who would be going to the Board of Engineers and that kind of thing? So what you're telling me then is that there's nothing on your website or nothing to guide consumers in terms of quality. Just a second. Is that the case?
Not on our website, but they would have the Bureau of Standards, for example, would be one
right.
area
They will have some guidance.
Have some guidance. So, but as a responsible person, you should, if you invest in a significant amount of money into a home, for example, you should do your due diligence and do your various checks and queries as to what quality and what material should be used, as the case may be.
Yes.
Just
a second.
For 1 minute.
Okay.
If I could, because Dr. Dowlett stumbled upon something very important here, talking about from in the construction sector, and what Member Swartzing was saying. The average person buys with trust at the hardware that the steel you're buying and the concrete, the cement you're buying and the gravel that you're buying all meet certain standards. And all of everything else do have standards that are applied. What we just found out is we're all flying blind with aggregate. And what the gentleman from the Ministry of Works is saying is nice, but imagine if everybody in Trinidad and Tobago who's doing construction right now had to go individually to the labs to get information about the aggregate that they're buying and the material they're buying. Where would we be where construction is?
No, but I take your point, Member Alexander, and Mr. Cooper. You know, that is I have used the word scary at this session. I have to use it for a second time, because coming from the country, you have people, let's say, with an old wooden house, and they are now moving onto a concrete dwelling. And how do they do it? They build a room, a concrete room, which they occupy, buying from perhaps one source, and then as they save up, they would add on to that as they move along. So the building process takes years. I mean, how do you get quality control for citizens so circumstanced, or is there no quality control?
There are certain levels of protocols that should be followed. Somebody building a home in a rural community should engage the regional corporation. The regional corporation would supposed to provide some oversight. So that is one of the areas that they should be responsible in looking into. I would say if I, probably because of my training, if I'm building a whole house, I would do my due diligence and look at the various areas where the aggregate is coming from, etc. But there is a certain level of trust that an individual should have within the company that they purchased in the aggregate, as the case may be, from the materials. So, but the Bureau of Standards does give some guidance. For example, like the steel, all steel is supposed to be supposed to have a mill certificate, and it's supposed to tell you, okay, it meets this particular quality and standard. But the average Joe may not be aware of all of these areas, and it would be wise for them to seek relevant counsel to know how to actually go about their construction.
Thank you. I will permit a very brief question from Member Cummings, and then the Vice Chair has been waiting for the longest while to pose a question or two to the Ministry of Works. So after Member Cummings, it's Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to Mr. Ganga in relation to the limestone that is produced by National Quarries, which you indicated there is no in-house capacity to test the quality of the material. Am I correct?
Yes, certain tests, yes.
And National Quarries, is it correct that National Quarries is the major supplier to the road building and infrastructure development in the country?
Yes, that is correct.
So then, Ministry of Works, is that one of the reasons why we have such poor roads in the country? Because we're not testing the materials, we don't know the quality of the limestone that is being used on the roads?
The Ministry of Works does test its material. We have an internal laboratory. We also use third-party testing, various consultants to confirm and verify that the material that we are purchasing is accurate, is good, as well as if we are using a contractor, the contractor is supposed to provide various certificates, say, detailing the quality of material that is going to be used, that it meets the engineering standards that we expect.
And what is the protocol if you find that that material that is being used is substandard?
Could you repeat the question?
What is the protocol? What is the next step? What happens if you find that the material being supplied?
Well, Member Cummings, I think we would be going down a rabbit hole there if we were to start delving into that, because then you'd be going to the point of, well, you're entitled to take legal action, collect evidence from expert witnesses, and so on. I don't know that we really have the time for that this evening. Vice Chair, would you like to pose your questions?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go to the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. I want to thank you all for the submissions you all did. It's excellent. And I just want to have a few concerns I want to thank the Ministry of Works for their submissions. It was excellent. I just have a few questions or comments to make, and maybe you can help me in responding. Under the Objective 1, to examine the impact of quarrying and mining activities on land use in Trinidad and Tobago, you had submitted, and I just want to switch the conversation away from quarrying and whether they're legal or illegal. And in some of your submissions, which is a bugbear for me, and we just completed a few months ago traffic management, and I know you all works on infrastructure as part of that. And there, in one of his submissions, a couple of his submissions, you talked about the movement of heavily, and I quote, the movement of heavily loaded trucks transporting aggregates must be explicitly accounted for in the design of road infrastructure, and even more so where overloading is expected. As it's quoted here, I understand it, but for the viewing public and the listening public, could you elaborate on that submission for me, please? Because I understand it and it's a bugbear for me, but I would just like you, if you can elaborate for the listening and viewing public of that submission, please.
Okay. Once we have a vehicle that is over, let me start from the design. Road is designed for a particular number of vehicles to traverse over it. Normally in pavement design, we use a truck as the critical piece of unit to do our analysis. A truck is supposed to carry a particular weight. If it carries more weight than was designed for, it causes the roadway to deteriorate rapidly. When we overload trucks, it causes the state of the road to deteriorate way faster than it's supposed to. Typically, a road is supposed to be designed for 20 years, with some maintenance starting between 7 and 10 years. You may have some interventions. What we have recognized is that along roadways closer to quarries, we have to do repairs much faster because of the overloading that takes place. So we have these trucks that put on what we call greedy bars or so, and extend the width of the height of the tray. That additional material that goes on top of the tray causes the roadway to deteriorate much faster. So whereas you may have to make an intervention, ideally, you're supposed to make an intervention at 7 years or 10 years, you may cut it down to 3 years. And the type of failures that take place actually rapidly deteriorate the foundation of the roadway. So we try to keep the repair restricted to the upper layers of the pavement. And because of the overloading, it goes deeper down. So we have to do deeper interventions to bring the roadway back up to a certain standard to carry the loading. So one last thing. So what we have tried to do was start to redesign the roads to carry the new loads because it's not regulated as well as it should be. So the pavements then become more expensive and more and so forth.
Well, but I agree with you, Mr. Cooper, Chair, if I just add. But these overloaded trucks goes throughout the country, not normally, well, you made a statement in the location of the quarries, but these overloaded trucks go out throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad, and they destroy the roads. And my concern is, where is the, lack of a better word, the policing of these overloaded trucks, and who then becomes responsible? Because out of this committee, and I be guided, and I mean no respect, we are operating in silos. And for us to really move forward, we need to break down these silos and have a more collaborative, communicative aspect between whether it is the police, Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Works, because it is doing injustice to that ministry. And so I don't have the answer. I don't think any one of us have the answer, but I just want to put that out. I see Minister Sarat Singh wants to add to this. I give way, Chair.
Thank you. I know we would have time to get into it, but I just want to raise it because this is part of your submission. In terms of this takes it back to quarrying or illegal quarrying and the impact on drainage, because we spend through your ministry hundreds of millions of dollars every year just dealing with not just patching, with all the drainage issues that is caused because of antecedents such as illegal quarrying and so on. So I don't know if you can speak to some of the negative impact on illegal quarrying on infrastructure, roads, on drainage, and how much remedial work that you guys have to do, and how much money we spend dealing with some of those issues.
Maybe I could.
Well, excuse me. So the illegal quarrying is a concern for the ministry because many of these illegal quarries operate in areas that where roads have not been actually designed. They have evolved over time. So there is a significant impact on the road infrastructure as well as the drainage. Oftentimes these trucks, they would come out of the quarries or the illegal quarries without having wheel washers, for example, and material would fall into the drains, wash into the side of the drains, and then ultimately reach into the rivers. And of course that continues to silt up the river, and there's the vegetation that takes place as a result and so forth. So we spend a lot of money actually desilting river waterways, watercourses, cleaning drains, and additionally it is also a safety hazard because many of these trucks, they operate without the standards of the tarpaulins, for example, covering the trucks and so forth. So that material spills onto the roadway and it causes vehicles to have their windscreens broken, etc. And some of those claims actually come back onto the ministry when, for example, if you're cleaning in the roadway and a stone, if we walk in an area and a stone hits a vehicle windscreen, then it comes back to the ministry to have some sort of involvement in it. So there's a safety risk. There is a lot of money that is spent, as I mentioned, in repairs and so forth.
To sort of, I know we may need to bring everyone back to talk about it in greater detail, but I wanted to talk about it because there are, besides the interagency issues to deal with all the regulatory framework and so on, and the collaborative approach, we also need to talk a little bit about the effects of, there's a connection between how we, because a lot of, I think last year we had spent about 300 million in just desilting alone. There is a cumulative effect on illegal quarrying, not just about what we are not collecting from royalties, but how much we have to spend as well. So that's why this is a very, very serious issue, both for the environment, on how we operate, on the quality of aggregate. There are so many issues here that we've just touched on a cursory level, but we need to dig into a little bit deeper, Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think that takes us to the recognition that for today, we will not be able to go any further, because if we were to explore any of the matters raised in any kind of depth, that we will be here all evening. I suspect that we will have to ask you all to return, if not necessarily at the same time, but perhaps at different times, but the Secretariat will be in touch with you. So at this point, I want to thank you, and I want to invite closing comments from any of the representatives present. You can choose from your team who you prefer to do the closing comments. Ministry of Energy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity this afternoon to answer some of the questions that would have been posed by the members of this honorable committee. I do take note of the fact that a lot of the questions do require more detailed answers and responses that are not convoluted, which they were not intended to be. It's really an approach that we are taking that is actively being pursued, but we certainly will follow up with additional details, giving the specifics of what we are doing in terms of the governance framework and the regulatory work that we recognize that there needs to be a lot done to improve. And so, just additionally, with regard to the questions that were raised specifically on the royalty, we will provide more detailed information for the committee in writing with regard to the volumes and clarification on where we have available information with regard to the owner of the mineral rights, so that we'll be able to differentiate a number that is potentially owed to the state in terms of royalties. So those things we can commit to providing in writing, and of course make ourselves available for future sittings of the committee to answer questions further as required by the Ministry of Energy. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Ministry of Works, could I have some closing comments?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on behalf of the Ministry of Works and Transport, I wish to thank the committee for the opportunity to contribute to this important inquiry. The issues discussed today reinforce that quarrying and mining are indispensable to Trinidad and Tobago's development. Every road, bridge, drainage system, coastal public building, and other critical infrastructure relies on a sustainable supply of quality aggregate. At the same time, these activities must be carefully managed to minimize their impacts on our infrastructure, our environment, and the communities we serve. The Ministry believes that the way forward lies in striking the appropriate balance between economic development and environmental stewardship. This requires stronger planning, improved enforcement, enhanced interagency collaboration, better data collection, effective axle load control, responsible rehabilitation of quarry sites, and long-term planning for sustainable management and use of finite aggregate resources, including greater emphasis on recycling and resource efficiency. The Ministry remains fully committed to working with all stakeholders, and we thank the committee once again for the opportunity to appear before the committee, and we appreciate the committee's attention and will be pleased to respond to any further questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ramharak. National Quarries, who will be doing the closing remarks?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are happy to be part of the proceedings. We are actually very happy that an inquiry such as this is taking place with regard to the quarrying industry. And, you know, in our view, there's a lot of room for improvement within the quarrying sector. The quarrying sector needs to be modernized. It needs to be further regulated. You know, and we at National Quarries, we are trying to be the leaders in that regard. We have put forward a plan to do just that within the industry. So hopefully this type of session would help us as well in terms of becoming or revolutionizing the quarrying industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, CEO. So I want to thank all of you for attending and assisting. Thank the viewing and listening audience, committee members, and Parliament staff. This meeting is now suspended. And members, we will stay back to meet briefly. But thank you all for attending.
Always a pleasure.